Hello, Writing 2201, and welcome to week 10. We are moving very close to the end of term. As I've been warning you pretty much since the beginning, we are accelerating in our work. So there's quite a lot of work that needs to be submitted. You've already submitted an assignment a couple days ago, and you've got more coming up. And really, you're just going to want to find some energy in you to get you through the rest of the term. Fortunately, there's no final exam in our class. Really, it's the submission of the final e-portfolio, which I will be talking about today. So I'm going to assign it today to give you a lot of time. Remember, I am doing this in order to build in accommodations into our class so that everyone, because everyone has different needs, in terms of requiring accommodations for a variety of different challenges, particularly during this challenging time. And so I am building these in to allow you to manage your time and also to address whatever it is that you need to accommodate, whether it's schedules, whether it's learning abilities, whatever it might be. It's really important that you try to really focus on and put all of these deadlines on your calendar to manage them. All right, so just to get started, as you can see, today we're going to be talking about, I've got quite a jam-packed lecture for you this week. There's two parts to the lecture, really important because I'm going to be covering the final assignment as well as giving you some more information on how to think about structuring that assignment, to think about document design, and to basically return back to what we've talked about all term, which is our audience and our purpose. So Robert Louis Stevenson, famous writer who wrote Treasure Island, said, "Do not write merely to be understood, write so you cannot possibly be misunderstood." And this is something that I've been trying to get across to you pretty much all term, the importance of error-free, clear writing that pays attention to both the smallest details as well as the larger ideas when we think about content and clarity and flow and so forth. So let's get started. Last week we talked about branding and how important it is to start thinking about how you're going to describe your capabilities. I will be building on that further this week. We also talked about feasibility and recommendation reports, which of course you are now working on. And you guys did another peer review. This week, we're going to cover the final e-portfolio assignment. I'm going to go through some very important components of the e-portfolios, and I'm going to talk about something that I really have sort of hit on several times during the term, which is storytelling. And in this case, you're not going to be telling a story of fiction. On the contrary, your e-portfolio is about sharing the narrative of your capabilities. Who are you? What is your vision? What is your purpose? What are the skills you bring to your audience? And so on. So you're going to want to think about what kind of story is your e-portfolio going to tell. And we are going to talk about cover letters and resumes. Now, cover letters and resumes are one of those documents that is listed in the different genres. I'll be teaching you this genre. It is not required to write a cover letter or resume, but it is one suggestion for a document that you can include in the final e-portfolio. So let's start there with the e-portfolio. I'm going to show you the assignment here and just go through it as I often do, so that, and you guys can go and take a look at the e-portfolio assignment on eClass as always. Just bear with me here while I share my screen with you. Here we go. Just gonna make sure that you guys can actually see that. One moment. Here we are. So you should see in front of you the assignment. This is already posted on eClass for you. And the first thing you're going to want to note is that it's due no later than November 27th. I know some students have told me that they've already started it and can they submit it early? That's totally fine. But it's due no later than November 27th, which is basically a week before our last class. One thing that you will note is that there will be no feedback, no written feedback on the e-portfolio. This is the final assignment. There are no more assignments after this. And you'll notice a good chunk of this assignment is actually submitting and revising work you've already gotten feedback on in our class. So think of this as the equivalent of a final test in the course where you don't get feedback on a final test. So that will be due no later than November 27th. I'm asking you to please upload a PDF this time, because what I discovered with the iFixit project is I can't actually click on links within eClass. That seems to be a bug within eClass. So I'm going to ask you guys to please upload PDFs. That is what I've been told is the way to work around this. So please make sure that you do that. You're going to see that your final assignment will include a link to your ePortfolio, as well as, so that's the live link, as well as a final reflective paper that you will be writing for this assignment. So I'll let you take a look at the goals, but these are goals we've been talking about all term, is about you finally putting together this professional final portfolio that will be a component that you will be able to use as part of your branding as you move through your academic career and then your professional career. So the purpose of this final assignment really is meant to be a key component of branding package you put together. It's a great supplement to both LinkedIn, which I will be talking about today, as well as a resume and cover letter, which I'll also be talking about. So you will submit that document that includes a link to your final ePortfolio as a PDF, as well as the final reflective paper. So the final ePortfolio will consist of the following components. The first is that you will include artifacts from our course. So you need to choose a minimum of 3 assignments from our class that you've already submitted. Before you include your assignments, you must go through and revise them. Do not resubmit work that is not accurate, that still contains flaws. So it's important that you go through. This is really where the work is in this assignment, is that you go through and you revise as part of the writing process. As you all know, there's always room for improvement in any kind of written document. And so it's important that we continue to work through and rewrite any material we've done before. So you're going to choose 3 assignments from our course. You've handed in plenty of assignments. You'll choose the ones that you feel best reflect the brand and the story you're trying to tell. You will then include 1 artifact from outside of Writing 2201. You can include anything you like. It's up to you. Some suggestions that I've got here that would be helpful given your industry, iTech. Resume is obvious one. Any kind of coding projects. I've had students in the past who've uploaded coding projects from other classes. That's great too. Any assignments from any of your other iTech classes. There's a lot of opportunity here. Some students have posted links to their GitHubs. It's totally up to you what you want to include, but there must be a minimum of 1 artifact from outside Writing 2201. And then the final thing you're going to do is your final reflective essay. So you're going to write a 750-word essay where you reflect on how the assignments and coursework that you've completed in our class have contributed to your growth as a writer and as a communicator, okay? As well as your ability to perform sort of professional, credible, engaged research. You also need to explain your rationale for the artifacts you've included in your ePortfolio. This reflective essay should appear on your ePortfolio as well, but I'm also asking you to submit it in text form here. So in your reflective essay, I've given you a whole bunch of guiding questions. These questions must be answered in your final reflective essay. And as always, you must pay attention to the structure, the grammar, the sentence structure, all of that in our writing class. These are key learning objectives and learning outcomes of our course. As always, I have shared with you the evaluation strategies. This is what I'll be looking at when I'm assessing the final ePortfolio and the final reflective essay. And I also want to highlight here that the point of the final reflective essay is not to talk about what you liked in the course and what you didn't like in the course. This is about thinking about this as a constructive exercise. Where have you grown? Where have you benefited? Where do you need to keep working on, right? All of us have areas of development to keep working. That's part of the joy and challenge of living, right? So there you go. I'll let you guys go in and take a look at that assignment. And so you can actually start thinking about what artifacts you're going to want to start cleaning up and revising before you post those. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so I can go back to our lecture. Here we go. So there we go. So when we're thinking about our journey, because that's kind of what this e-portfolio is doing, is documenting our journey and our story, we want to think about how research is a decision-making journey, and we need to constantly engage in decision-making that is logical, consistent, and coherent, as is our writing. Writing is a process. So I will often say, and I'm sure I've said it before in one of my lectures, that the thing that I love most about writing is that I can always improve it. But on the flip side, the thing that I find most frustrating about writing is that I can always improve it. So it's one of these things that we can always be tweaking and revising. You know, it doesn't matter how long you've been writing or whether you even write as sort of, you know, a profession. I have friends and colleagues who are colleagues and professional writers, and they're constantly tweaking and improving, and they fully recognize that there's always room for improvement. So it's something that I want you guys to really take away with you, is this idea that writing is a process. When we're thinking about the e-portfolios, it's very important for us to think about the same things we've always thought about. So if I can just get my little red ball here and make this easier for you to see. Just a second. There we go. Great. So we have 4 areas. We've talked about these areas before. We're always wanting to think about what are these e-portfolios for, just like any of our documents, and what do our readers expect to see there? So we think in terms of purpose, as always, and genre, right? What kind of genre are we writing? Who is our audience? So we want to think about explaining the text rhetorical situation, okay? And we're always writing thinking about our audience. What are they looking for? What do they need? What do they already know? What do they not know? We want to think also about what you want your reader to know. So we're thinking about audience in terms of not just what they already know, but what you want to leave them with when they've sort of walked away from your e-portfolio. Remember, e-portfolios are just another component of your brand. It's not as though every time you apply for a job or a co-op or an internship that the hiring manager will always look at your e-portfolio. This is another piece of your overall story. So, you know, you'll have your network, which is the most important piece, right, that I hope you're building as I've been discussing. You've got your LinkedIn portfolio, which is really important. You've got your resume, your cover letter, you're building, you know, an academic sort of brand for yourself that will build credibility. The e-portfolio is yet another piece. And what I generally find is that it is excellent as a tiebreaker, if you will. So when it's a very competitive job, students who, and this is just students who've told me this in the past, but that students who say, you know what, I also have an e-portfolio, it just becomes yet another piece, right? It's kind of like having the degree. It's yet another thing to distinguish you from the competition. So when we're thinking about the actual e-portfolio components, I am not telling you how to structure the e-portfolio. I have had you think about this in your proposal. I've given you many models to look at, but ultimately you have the final say in what your e-portfolio looks like. What I'm going to be assessing is how carefully have you paid attention to the components we've been discussing all term: clarity, user friendliness, audience focused, clear purpose, and so on. So you're going to want to think about these different areas. These all need to be included in your e-portfolio. So you're going to have some kind of homepage with a menu, and that homepage needs to introduce you. Who are you? There should be a headshot there, a professional headshot. What is the purpose? What is the context? So this is kind of like background information for your audience. And then there should be some kind of menu or tab system, right? So it's kind of like, here's a sort of a menu that shows your contents at a glance. It's something very easy for your reader to look at. And then you're going to have different pages, or if you want to do sort of the one-page model, you can do that as well. Again, that's up to you. But each of these artifacts, as we've talked about, will be different types of work that will show, that will prove and show the kind of capabilities that you have. And there should be descriptions with your artifacts, right? To give context. You don't just throw up a document from our class without telling your reader. You're going to want to explain, this is a project covered in, you know, a second-year writing course, blah, 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 which demonstrates my ability to write concisely, etc. Okay? And then you're going to have that reflection component, right, which I'm asking you to do, that 750-word reflection component that highlights growth and basically translates for the audience why these skills will matter to them. What do these skills prove that you can do? What will you be bringing? What is your value proposition, right? That's what you want to think about. You want to think about how your ePortfolio makes it very clear what your value proposition is for them. So I just wanted to share this. This is a study that came out of a study done in 2016. And I just wanted to show you what is really important to readers of ePortfolios. And, you know, there are 3 different columns. The one that you're probably going to want to pay attention to is employers, because that is your audience after all. And you'll see here that for employers, what was really important is graphics, a linear navigation, a short reflection that introduced everything, right? And then a resume right up front. So again, I'm going to let you guys decide what you want to put up there. I did want to show you this though, so that you are going into this with a clear sense of what employers are looking for. Because after all, as I've said to you right from the beginning, I've been very transparent about this. I want you to leave this class with a clear, workable ePortfolio that you will continuously add to, that will help you as you start to compete in this ever increasingly competitive marketplace. So when you're thinking about reader priorities, you want to show content that extends your ePortfolio. So yes, you're going to show skills, or you're going to list skills, but you're going to describe and show them as well, okay? And then you're going to show some kind of reflection that is very significant for your employer, because it shows that you're ready for your career. You're ready to take, say, the academic skills you've, you know, sort of mastered in your degree. You're ready to take them to the next level. So that's why that reflection portion is so important. It shows your ability to grow as a person, as an employee, as a lifelong learner, and so on. So remember, this is about showing and making clear the value that you bring to your audience. So what you're going to want to do then is you're going to want to describe your capabilities. And it's a good idea to have a brief description that frames your capabilities. And this way your reader can make sense of this, right? So you want to tell your readers not just what you did in the past. You want to make sure that you tell your readers what you want them to take away from it. This is why when I talk about putting together a resume, I say whatever you do, don't just list the tasks that you did at your last job. Your employer, future employer, doesn't care about that. What they want to know is what skills from there will translate and help me, right, address my bottom line, or maybe I'm having problems in the team or whatever. So you got to show transferability, right? You've got to show them what's important for them. So that's really important. A lot of the resumes that I see are not focused on the audience. They're focused on the person who's writing the resume, which is not what you want to get across, that you're focusing on yourself rather than the needs of the prospective employer. So when we're thinking about describing your capabilities, when you're giving the little context blurb for each of the artifacts, these are the things that you're going to want to answer in your little blurb, right? So why did you choose this artifact, for example? And what are the most important things that the reader should take from this artifact? What was the context? And I said this before, right? This was written for, you know, this class, or, you know, I produced this code for this class, and this demonstrates my ability to. So you're going to want to answer these kinds of questions so that you can place each of your artifacts into context that will make it significant for your reader. So it's really important to describe and explain your capabilities in your ePortfolio. And that has to go with each of your artifacts so that, you know, it's not going to help if you just throw up an artifact, a feasibility report, because you submitted that in my class. I mean, I know what it's doing there, but you need to tell a prospective employer why you chose this. Why did you include this in your portfolio? What should they take away from that? So these are some guiding questions that you can ask yourself as you're writing your little context blurb that goes with the artifacts. When we're thinking about an ePortfolio, one of the things that I would suggest to you, you don't have to include it for our assignment, but I would suggest that as you continue, if you decide not to include a cover letter or resume in your ePortfolio, I would suggest that at some point you do include that. So one thing that you can do is to start by looking to other job descriptions. Normally, I would actually have a discussion like this in our class. We would look for 2 to 3 job descriptions in the area you're thinking you want to work in, and you'd start paying attention to what are they asking for. Usually they're asking for some kind of, you know, oral communication skills, written communication skills, ability to pay attention to detail, and so on. It's a good idea that you look to see, what does my audience want? You know, I always say to students, the best time to be looking for a job is not when you need it. It's before you need it. So you should be getting a sense by looking at job postings, you know, like maybe every quarter you just got it in your calendar. Okay, let me take a look. Let me take a pulse. What is the market like? What kinds of skills are being asked for? You know, the thing with writing and communication skills is those are required regardless. But it's a good idea to have a clear sense of what kinds of things employers are looking for so that you can think about how your story speaks to that. So it's very important that you think about the reader here. This is a reader-focused document, right? Just as all of our documents should be. And that document needs to tell us a story about you. So, for example, you're going to want to think about how you order the material and how you describe it, because all of that will tell a story, right? Super important to make sure that whatever you have here is authentic, okay? It becomes very clear to a prospective employer when you are not actually including material that actually clearly reflects your abilities. It'll become abundantly clear in an interview, and that is not what you want, because that will show that you lack integrity. So really important to strive for authenticity, right? What really are my values? What am I really trying to show my reader here? And it really needs to be consistent overall in terms of tone, style, you know, how the interface works. Consistency is absolutely critical to your overall story. And you're going to want to think about this as well, not just within your ePortfolio, but also without. So your LinkedIn profile should be consistent with your eProfile, or ePortfolio rather, should also be consistent with your resume and cover letter. You know, should also be consistent in terms of headshots. You know, the same headshot you use for LinkedIn should be the same headshot that you use for your ePortfolio. So you're going to want to think about the consistency of your brand. It's no different than any brand. I mean, if you think about, you know, Apple's brand is consistent everywhere. They don't have different logos, for example, on different products. The point is that the logo, this brand, is easily recognizable. And we talked about this last week or the week before. So you're going to want to think about that, building a consistent brand for yourself. When we think about typical ePortfolio stories, there are many different types of stories. You guys have actually looked at these because I've given you samples. Here are some examples. You might want to think about a narrative, what you've done in the past and what you've learned over time and how this has contributed to your current capabilities. It could be strategic. Maybe you want to start with the most important or relevant or, you know, most recent capabilities and highlight those by putting them first, and then decide whether to leave out others. Just like a resume doesn't include absolutely everything you've done. For example, do not have your high school listed on your resume. That actually does not reflect a brand that you want. Once you head into post-secondary, that's what you put in. The assumption is once you've gone into post-secondary, obviously you completed a high school diploma, so leave that off as one example. You might want to approach it from a developmental. Maybe you want to show sort of growth over time and how your capabilities have changed. So you might want to choose specific areas or themes that you've developed, okay? The nice thing with this one is it shows that you're a lifelong learner and that you're adaptable to change and that you're able to grow and sort of, keep reinventing yourself. So you want to think about what story is most appropriate for your e-portfolio that lines up with your vision and the jobs that you're looking at. So that's really important. These are just possibilities. Again, the ultimate choice is yours. When you're thinking about reader priorities to design your e-portfolio, you're going to want to think about navigation, okay? Really, really important that you make this user-friendly. It's one of the things that I will be assessing when I take a look at your final e-portfolio. So you're going to want to think about what kind of menu, tab, or table of contents. You guys have seen there's lots of different ways you can approach this. What you want to do is make sure that it shows the story at a glance, right? Because let's be honest, if you are lucky enough to have a prospective employer look at your portfolio, chances are they're not going to be on there for very long. So you want to make sure that where they go, the landing page, they can look at your story at a glance and they can figure it out. Okay. So you might want to make a concept map here to think about the structure of your e-portfolio, how you're going to organize this. So that's one way that you can do that. And we've talked about concept or mind maps before in the class. When we're thinking about how we're going to structure this, I did want to comment on be very careful if you're going to use templates, okay? This goes not just for e-portfolios, but for resumes. Please be very careful when you use templates, okay, or when you use examples. This is why I don't give sample assignments to students. I don't want you to mimic what other people do. That really hurts your brand, because if you're using standardized material, it doesn't take very long for an employer to realize, oh, you know what, I've seen this template so many times from Word for a resume. This person didn't even put enough work into this to, come up with their own. So just be careful, because that can undercut your brand. If you're trying to suggest that you show initiative, but then you've used a template, this undercuts your brand. So you've got to be careful. Again, it's about being authentic. So nothing wrong with templates as a base, okay? So a lot of them are fill in the blanks, but be very careful, right? You're gonna wanna make sure that you are very careful about how you use models or examples. It's a good idea to sort of add your own touch to any kinds of templates or examples you're using. Not a great idea to just copy other people's examples for your portfolios. I gave those to you as a model, but this is not, it's not like a math formula where you just substitute, values A plus B equals C. It's not like that. This is about telling your story. This is a human story. And so if you want to differentiate yourself, you're going to have to really focus on that human part. Who are you? What are your capabilities? What kind of interesting skills have you put together based on your experiences, either through work or volunteering or co-op, and also your academic experiences? So when we're thinking about the e-portfolio, like any document, we're going to want to think about the design principles, all right? And so there are different options here, but I will say that I just want you to think about this. Your e-portfolio should be designed with intention, right? You want to have a clear structure and navigation, but are you going to use, full text, for example, like with context you want to put with your artifacts? Do you want just bullet points? Do you want text? What you decide on, just decide with intention, think about this. Who's your audience? What are they going to prefer? Do you want, maps versus text? Do you want more graphics, right? You're going to want to think about this, and you're going to want to make sure that your e-portfolio is mobile friendly as well. So graphics are great. I don't think you want to have like 100% text. No one's going to read that. But you don't want so many graphics or images that it slows down the loading of your e-portfolio. That's deadly. You don't want an e-portfolio that takes too long to load. And you're going to want to think about design principles. So I've talked about this before. When you think about my slides, I always cringe when I walk into a workshop with a speaker who has you know, some kind of like, you know, blue background with light blue text and it's in a 2-point font, that is really hard to read. Instead, you're looking for high contrast, and you'll notice this is actually, studies have shown that this is the easiest kind of slide to read. High contrast, dark background, light text, right? You're going to want to think about that. How are you going to align your points? How are you going to group things together? And you want to avoid repetition. So you're going to want to think about these design principles, right? I model this for you every single week. You'll notice there's a consistency, right, to the slides here, because this is part of my brand. Clean, consistent, easy to read. And that's what you want for yourself as well. As always, we've talked about your e-portfolio. I love this image here because this is really the way to think about it. You know, your e-portfolio is like a container, and it contains all of these things, your values, any kind of experiential stories, educational stories, artifacts, and so on. And you're going to want to think about, again, why are you compiling and designing this e-portfolio? It's got to be more than, well, Janet's making us do this for this class. You're going to want to use this as an excellent opportunity for building your story. So it's got to link with your brand. Who are you? What vision of yourself are you selling to the world? What are your skills and your capabilities? But more importantly, authenticity. What are your core values? What are your careers, you know, the trajectory that you set out for yourself? So again, doing this with intention, really being very mindful about what it is that you're telling the world about yourself. So just a review, if you recall, there are lots of different artifacts that you can use for the e-portfolio. You've got to use 3 from within writing, but I will say that one that does show up very frequently, and I would recommend, as I said before, that you include it regardless of whether you decide to do it for the final submission here, is a resume. Okay, so just to review, we've covered a lot. We've done business correspondence. I'm going to cover the resume today. We've done proposals, a couple of those. We've done recommendation and feasibility reports, and we started off our term with instruction user guides. So we have covered a lot of genres. Now, we didn't cover everything. We've talked about this before. It would take a couple of years to cover all these genres. And as it is, some of the genres I've covered, it's been kind of fast. So something for you to remember, that we have covered quite a few. That's another capability you have, that you can write across genres, that you understand genres in a professional context. So that's really important. So that's the end of the first part of the lecture this week. In the second part, I will be talking about resumes as yet another genre that you can add to the list of genres that you've mastered in our course. So get up, take a break, and then come back and watch part 2, and I'll see you soon.